Now earlier we learned how GPS works and the basics of IFR-approved GPS systems. So now let's look into some more details about what is called WAAS, which stands for Wide Area Augmentation System, and Non-WAAS GPS systems. With IFR-approved WAAS GPS systems, you'll have much more accuracy and reliability than with non-WAAS systems. The basic difference between WAAS and non-WAAS GPS systems is that WAAS GPS systems are augmented by ground stations. These ground stations provide GPS position corrections, giving you much better accuracy. This is done with a network of WAAS ground stations and master stations across North America. So how does WAAS work? Well, what the ground station does is quite simple and very ingenious. The ground station receives a signal coming in from the GPS satellite, and then it compares the computed position from the incoming signal to its surveyed known position. The ground station then figures out what that position difference is and sends a correction signal to the master station, which then sends the correction signal to communication satellites. And the correction is then sent to your WAAS GPS receiver. Now, based on the correction signal, your WAAS GPS refines its position solution. This means your WAAS GPS receiver provides a much more accurate position solution down to just a few feet, allowing you to fly precision-like approaches down to very low decision altitudes. Now take a look at this RNAV GPS approach to runway 1 right into Wichita, Kansas. It has a published LPV approach, which means localizer performance with vertical guidance. And in this case, the minimum altitude is just 200 feet above ground level. That's as good as an ILS. Now, your WAAS GPS has several features you'll want to know about. First, a panel-mounted WAAS GPS system would be certified under TSO, Technical Standard Order, C145 or C146. Next, your WAAS GPS is said to be a standalone unit. What this means is that you do not need legacy navigation equipment in your aircraft to receive ground-based nav aids that would normally be used for navigation. That means no VOR receiver, no DME, and no dreaded, much maligned ADF. Even the ground-based navigation facilities do not need to be operational. Now, with non-WAAS GPS systems, which are typically older units like this one, position accuracy is validated using RAIM, which stands for Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring. But IFR-approved WAAS GPS systems have instead what is called fault detection and exclusion, or FDE. Now, FDE is different than RAIM, although RAIM is still important for you to understand in case the WAAS signal is not available. But pre-flight RAIM checks are no longer required with WAAS operating normally. With WAAS, fault detection and exclusion, FDE, needs at least 6 satellites in view to detect and exclude a faulty satellite. So instead of declaring your GPS unusable with a RAIM alert, FDE just excludes the bad satellites from the position solution based on the remaining satellites it can see. What you need to know is the check for satellite geometry and outages is done automatically for you by your WAAS GPS. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea to blast off into the sky without checking the status of the WAAS GPS system. So how can you check to see if WAAS is working before flight? Well, the FAA maintains a real-time WAAS and GPS monitoring website. So let's take a look at the website's WAAS vertical navigation service page. Here, this area surrounded by the red line is where WAAS LPV service level is operational. And you can see here that at the time of this web page update, the LPV service level is available all across North America. Now you'll also want to check GPS NOTAMs as part of your pre-flight operations. If you call 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF for your weather briefing, keep in mind that you need to specifically request GPS and WAAS NOTAMs from the flight briefer. Another way is to check the FAA GPS NOTAM website. Here in this example, you can see that GPS satellite 21 is U/S, which means unserviceable. Most often when you check GPS NOTAMs, you'll see either a satellite offline, like here in this NOTAM, or GPS interference testing, which is done for national security requirements. Now, the reason for making sure you can navigate using your WAAS GPS is because you'll see procedures that will specify the minimum RNAV performance. Take a look here at Detroit's Wayne County Airport ILS runway 3 right approach. And you can see that for this approach, you'll need an RNAV system that can be accurate to RNAV1 performance levels. Now, most modern IFR-approved GPS systems meet both the RNAV1 and RNAV2 performance requirements. What RNAV1 simply means is that your system needs to be accurate to 1 nautical mile 95% of the time. And RNAV2 means that your system needs to be accurate to, you got it, 2 nautical miles 95% of the time. But make sure you check your specific GPS flight manual supplement so you know what your system is approved for. Okay, say you do not have WAAS as part of your IFR-approved GPS. Well, then you have an unaugmented GPS, one without WAAS, like this one, meaning it is not using the ground station's corrected position signal. And let's see how this compares to a WAAS GPS. First is that non-WAAS GPS units would be certified under a different TSO. In this case, it's C129 or C196, and that means the non-WAAS GPS unit in your aircraft is not a standalone unit. So other navigation methods must be available to you. You must have the avionics in your aircraft for whatever ground-based navigation facilities are needed on your route of flight. And these ground-based navigation facilities must be operational. That means you'll certainly need a VOR receiver, maybe a DME, or even the ADF. It also means you'll need to check additional NOTAMs for ground-based navigation aid outages along your route of flight. As the FAA continues with its next-gen program, more ground-based navigation facilities will be permanently removed from service or may face longer out-of-service times. Now, we mentioned that WAAS GPS uses FDE to validate its position integrity, and a non-WAAS GPS uses RAIM. We'll cover how RAIM works in greater detail in an upcoming lesson, but for now, if your IFR certified non-WAAS GPS receiver is not able to determine an adequate position solution, it will provide you with a message that indicates a RAIM failure. The message could say INTEG, like this, for integrity, or it could say RAIM not available, depending on the unit. And if you see a message like this, you cannot rely on the GPS for accurate navigation. As we wrap up our discussion of IFR-approved GPS equipment, there's something that you'll want to know about the FAA knowledge test. If you see questions about GPS equipment that do not specifically say anything about WAAS, that means they are asking about non-WAAS equipment. So keep that in mind when you choose your answer.